let's go on to the next one. Let's do the bladder. So, what do you think? Does the sympathetic nervous system start the bladder or stop the bladder? Okay, so right now, if we were in class, there would be differing decisions about this one. Some people would say it stops the bladder, and some would say it starts the bladder. Now, the reason why you're getting differing opinions is because some people are thinking about, well, I'm thinking about my speech class, and I didn't have to go to the bathroom while I was giving Speech 101. But then other people in class are thinking, yeah, I remember that time that my friend was so stressed out that they actually peed their pants. Right? So this is a hard one. Actually, the sympathetic nervous system stops the bladder. Okay? Stops the bladder. And then it would start the bladder. Start bladder. But then some of you are thinking of, well, then how do you explain when you urinate on yourself because you're so scared? That is called parasympathetic overcompensation. Parasympathetic. Okay, so it's the same word, parasympathetic, and then overcompensation. Ooh, I can't find the mouse. There it is. Overcompensation. So how many of you believe in voodoo death? That is, I put a spell on you and you will die. Do you believe in that? Well, actually, it's similar to urinating on yourself when you're so scared. It's also similar to fainting. So psychology does believe in voodoo death, but there's two criteria that have to be met in order for us to believe in voodoo, for it to work. But you know what? I'm going to guess that after I teach you about this voodoo death thing, that a lot of you might actually know somebody that died from a form of voodoo death. So with voodoo death, what you have is somebody puts a curse on you. You have to know about the curse. You have to believe in the curse. And then your social support network, your group of people that you hang out with, they have to believe in the curse. So the criteria that have to be met in order for voodoo death to work is you have to believe it, and then the people that you hang out with, who you associate with, they also have to believe it. So those two factors seem to contribute to the ability to succumb to like a curse or voodoo. So I'll tell you a couple stories. There was this guy, and this one is from Africa. These are all coming from Walter Cannon. They probably mentioned him in your textbook. So Walter Cannon, he wrote about all these cases of voodoo deaths. So there was this man, and he was a missionary man, and he was going and he was preaching to everybody in Africa. But in this particular tribe, they believed that the chicken was sacred. So they couldn't eat the hen, they couldn't hurt the hen. So he was going on and, preaching to everyone. And you know how some people are very cynical. So one guy said, look, you know what, I really don't want to hear about your religion. I'm not into religion, but you can come stay with me tonight if you need to, because I see that it's getting dark, you're running out of time, and you're far from home. So the guy says, thank you so much. He goes in, and he says, the other man says, well, here's dinner. Would you like to have dinner? And the guy says, okay, but there's no chicken in it, right? And the friend says, oh, no, it's fine. It's not chicken. Don't worry about it. Just eat it. So the man who's the missionary, he ate the stew, and then he left. The man was sorry that he couldn't convert him, but he went off on his mission to preach. So 2 months later, he comes back, and he goes to the man's house to bring him a gift for letting him stay the night. And the man, I guess he was in a very cynical mood. He says, so you're done and you're going back to your tribe? Yes. And do you feel that your trip was worthwhile? Yes, it was worthwhile. Well, how are you feeling? I'm feeling fine. Why? Well, you know that stew that you ate 2 months ago had chicken in it. And you see that there's nothing wrong with you. And the man turned white. He says, "Oh my gosh, this is terrible. What have you done? I can't believe this." And the guy says, "Look, it's nothing. It's fine." And the guy says, "This is horrible. I can't believe I've committed the ultimate sin." And he just kind of stumbled away, and he walked back to his tribe, and he told them what had happened, and he felt so bad and was just terrible. And then the tribe was all praying for him and chanting about him. And within 3 days, he had died. Now, some of you are thinking, "Oh, Amy, come on. Are you going to sit here and tell us ghost stories? We have better things to do than tell ghost stories. That would only happen in some kind of weird tribal community." All right, well, let's go to America now. All right, so we're in America. Now, we are down in a swamp down in Florida, and these 3 triplets were born to a midwife. And why this midwife would say something like this, I have no idea. But she says when the 3 triplets were born on Friday the 13th, they were superstitious about Friday the 13th. And she said, "Oh my gosh, triplets on Friday the 13th. The first one will die before she's 16. The second one will die before she's 21. And the third one will die before she's 23. Oh, these poor children, they have this hex upon them." So the first one did die. One of them did die before they were 16. I'm not sure why, but it was relatively common because this was back in like the very early 1900s. So one did die. Then the second one, like the other 2 were left, and they made it to their 21st birthdays, and they went out to celebrate. And accidentally, one got hit by a stray bullet. I know, that's crazy. I know. But let's just talk about the third one. Okay, so if you were the third one, wouldn't you be freaking out? I would be freaking out. I would be totally freaking out because, like, it would be hard, if you're told you have 2 years left to live and you never know what's going to happen. You don't have a disease, so it's your life isn't just going to end like because of the disease. You don't know what's going to happen. That would be pretty hard. So you can understand that this woman was under severe stress. She lost her other 2 triplets. They died from this curse. The curse has predicted that she's going to die by the time she's 23. I can see where she would go a little crazy. So as it got closer and closer to her 23rd birthday, she became like really, really almost psychotic. Like, oh my gosh, she's just picturing somebody's going to come and get her. So they checked her into the hospital. And they tried to give her attention, but there were times when they couldn't give her attention. So it's the night before her 23rd birthday, and for a short period of time she was left alone. In that time, she hyperventilated and died. So the third one is the one that I'm talking about with explaining about this parasympathetic overcompensation. But I know a lot of you are just like, "Oh my gosh, Amy, you're telling us some bizarre stories. How can we believe that this is true?" Did you know that this has even been found with animals? So this was, I think Richter was his name. Richter was in the lab with some rats, and he was very bored, and he was testing the swimming abilities of rats. Rats are very good swimmers. So he was bored, and he had some scissors, and like rats' whiskers are like fingernails. Like if I cut your fingernails, it doesn't hurt you, right? But what's different about the rat's whiskers than opposed to fingernails is they're your kinesthetic sense. They like help you to balance. And so he would cut their whiskers so they weren't in pain, but still it did mess them up. They would start walking all discombobulated because they used those whiskers as a way of feeling around. So he thought it would be fun to cut their whiskers and throw them in the water and see how they swim when they're all discombobulated. So if you can imagine this, we've got a rat, chop chop, cut off his whiskers, then we throw him into the water. He sinks to the bottom, and he's waiting for him to come up and swim all discombobulated. But that rat's not coming up. He's not coming up. So he reaches down, and the rat is as dead as a doornail. He's like, "What? What the heck? A rat can't drown that fast. Drowning takes a while. What is going on?" But the rat is dead, unquestionably dead. So he opens the rat up. Sure enough, the lungs are not filled with water. So he's like, "That's crazy." He gets another rat, chop chop, throws the rat in the water, waits for the rat to come up, but that rat ain't coming up. All right, so the rat is dead again. What is going on? This is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Rats can swim. There's no reason. Their whiskers have nothing to do with whether or not they could swim. It's just going to throw their balance off. What's going on? So then he gets another rat, chop chop, but this time he places the rat in the water, okay, and he saves the rat, okay, right? He grabs the rat as soon as it goes to the bottom and picks it up. And in his hand, he can feel the rat's heart beating. You know how if you're holding an animal, you can feel their heart beating? And this heart is just racing. It's like so fast. He's like, oh my gosh, you poor rat. And he starts petting the rat. Calm, calm, calm. Now, if you remember, when we learned about the lungs that touch release oxytocin. It's very calming. It's very soothing. It helps us to feel healthier. So the rat slowly calms down, and he can feel the heart slow. When he feels the heart just slow a lot, so he almost can't feel the heart in his hand anymore. It's like, it's very, very faint. What he does is he lets go and lets the rat swim around. And sure enough, that was it. And so what they believe is that it's like this parasympathetic overcompensation. When we get so stressed, think of the sympathetic and parasympathetic as being like on a rubber band. When we get so stressed out, what happens is the sympathetic pulls really hard one way, but then the parasympathetic is trying to balance it out. So it overcompensates for the sympathetic response by pulling back, and it releases your bowels. It releases your urine. It can cause you to faint because basically what it does is it shuts down the heart, it shuts down the lungs, and the person doesn't have enough oxygen and they faint. So voodoo death, fainting, and urinating on yourself when you're scared can all be explained by something called parasympathetic overcompensation. So, but some of you, if you remember, I said you might know somebody who died from a form of voodoo death. So basically what I'm saying is if you see what triggers this sympathetic response and what triggers the parasympathetic response, we talked about this before, is basically how you define it. You can give yourself the message, oh my goodness, I should get stressed out. Or you can give yourself the message like, why bother anymore? Why bother? You know what? Let's just die. So you can give yourself this message, I want to live, and then you can give yourself this message, I want to die. When Viktor Frankl, he was this famous psychiatrist that got put into the concentration camps. When he unfortunately was put in the concentration camps, he still did what came natural to him. Since he was a psychiatrist, is basically he just looked at did what came natural to him is he watched human behavior while he was in there. I mean, he had to do all the work and stuff, but he was looking at human behavior. So basically his question to himself was, why do some people just commit suicide? Why do some people die so quickly while all of us are on the same diet, all of us are under the same condition, but some people, they die very quickly under these conditions, and some people will commit suicide. Why do some of us commit suicides? Why don't others? And basically in his studies inside the concentration camp, what he came up with was meaning. Man's search for meaning. People who felt like they had something left to do, a paper still to write, some family still alive, there's hope. The ones that believed that there was something left to do or some hope left, they were the ones who lived against all odds. But the ones that felt like there was no hope, all of my family is dead, I have nothing left to live for, they would die very quickly. I think a lot of you know the statistic that if one spouse, let's say you've got a long-term married couple, they've been married over 25 years, and even if one of them is much older than the other, if one spouse dies, do you guys know what the life expectancy is for the second spouse? It's 2 years. So you can look this up in literature, is basically what they're saying is like they were a couple, they were entwined, and kind of what saves another spouse from dying quickly after the first spouse is if the other spouse, that's the remaining spouse, has something left to do. They have families still to take care of, or they had a full life without their spouse. But if they evolved their lives around each other, that they did everything together, and that was their reason kind of for living, then when one dies, the other one's likely to follow within 2 years. So basically, let's think about the way you might have experienced a form of voodoo death. let's say that some of you had a family member where the doctor said, I'm so sorry. You only have 6 months left to live. Now, the truth of the matter is no one is God in this world, so we don't truly know. They're making their estimation based on past history. But when a doctor says to you, I'm so sorry, you have 6 months left to live, do we tend to believe them? Yes, we do tend to believe them, right? And does our social support network tend to believe them? Yes, they do. And so could it be possible? What we do know is a lot of patients are good patients. They die right on time. But are they dying right on time? I mean, that's not always the case. Are they dying right on time because the doctor was right, or because they kind of gave themselves the message, I want to die, I want to die? Now, I don't want you to take this to extremes, because that's a problem here. It's like sometimes people have cancer and it's metastasized, it's spread all over the body, and sometimes the pressure is put on them, well, if you really wanted to heal this cancer, then you could with your mind. Or if you really wanted to live, then you could keep living. But that's taking it too far. There's an element of what I'm saying to you that maybe we do have a bit of control over our death. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you know stories where they waited just until after someone got married and then they died, or they waited just till a birth, or a lot of deaths happen right after the holidays because, oh, I'm just going to see my family this one last time and then I'm going to go. Or maybe some of you know stories of, they waited for someone to get to the hospital, the person held their hand, and then they went off to die. So maybe there is some control, but I don't know how much. So maybe you guys understand why I say you've seen somebody that died from a voodoo death. Is because the doctor said that they were going to die at this time, and they believe it, the social support network believes it, and there we go. Okay, so this is all parasympathetic overcompensation, is when the parasympathetic nervous system overcompensates for strong sympathetic activity. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard, like in the electric chair, they tend to ejaculate or urinate on themselves, defecate on themselves. That would be a form of parasympathetic overcompensation.